To that end, the request is for the love of Ahlul Bayt, for the love of the mother of Hussain, who certainly comes where her son is remembered, that we keep our voices down and we stay focused and attentive. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما أرسلناك إلا رحمة للعالمين آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat for ta'ajil faraj sahib al-asr wa zaman. Before we get to our discussion of tonight, I have a short story to tell you guys in the discussion that we've been having on the process of raising children and important points to note in the process of raising children. You guys okay with the story? Everybody's all right? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In the time of Sayyid Muhsin al-Hakim rahmatullah alayh, who was the marja of all of the ummah before Sayyid al-Khoi, there's a story that comes from one of the clerics who would sit in his barrani, in his meeting area where people would come to see him. This alim, he mentions that one day we were sitting with Sayyid Muhsin in the barrani and people were coming to see Sayyid Muhsin al-Hakim and see the marja of the time and speak about their matters. And while Sayyid Muhsin was taking visitors and the marja, Ayatollah Muhsin al-Hakim was taking visitors, a young boy came and sat in the back of the hall. And people came and went and the boy sat in the back and he never came forward to speak to the marja. He never came forward to speak to Sayyid Muhsin al-Hakim until eventually Sayyid Muhsin al-Hakim stopped everyone. And he said to the boy, "Come to me." He said, "Do you have a question?" And the boy said, "Yes, but I'm embarrassed." Sayyid Muhsin says, "Don't be embarrassed. Talk to me. Ask me. What do you want?" So the boy says, "Sayyidina, today is the day that khums is due upon me. Yesterday, my father gave me some money, and today, because I possess this money, I have an obligation to pay khums. Can I give you my khums?" And the Marja says, "Yeah, what's to be embarrassed?" He says, "No, I'm embarrassed that it's a very small amount of money." So the Sayyid says, "Do you need help calculating?" He says, "Sayyidina, my dad gave me $5. I'm saying $5, but dad gave him 5. So he says, "Son, do you know what your responsibility is?" He replies, "I know, but I'm embarrassed to give such a small amount." The Sayyid says, "Don't be embarrassed. Whatever is your wajib upon you, fulfill it." So the boy reaches into his pocket, pulls out the equivalent of $1 and hands it to the Sayyid and says, "Here is my obligation, I have fulfilled it." Sayyid says, "Thank you very much," says to his secretary, "Give him a receipt," and the boy leaves. As the boy leaves, the Sayyid looks to the people in the room and he says, "I swear to you, I have never received more pure money in my life than this $1 this boy just gave me." The significance of this story, the importance of this story, is that if you want your children to be generous, If you want your children to fulfill their religious responsibilities, don't wait until they grow up and then put the liability and tell them, now you have an obligation. Teach them from a young age with your own hands. Introduce them to the process of giving charity with your own hands. Give them money and then tell them that from this, make sure that you give sadaqah and teach them how to give sadaqah. Teach them how to pay their religious responsibilities today, so that tomorrow when they get older, they don't have an unnecessary attachment with wealth. A child develops an attachment to wealth when he believes that his wealth should not be questioned, and it's his. But if you teach them from a young age to give with their own hands, to offer assistance with their own hands, to give from their wealth themselves that you give them, they will learn that wherever the wealth comes from, I have an obligation to give with it. I have something I need to accomplish with it. That father, look how intelligent he was. He gave the children the day before the date, he taught them what day to take out their khums. The day before that date comes, he gives them money so each of them has a liability, and his children go out and from an early age learn that this is one of the wajibat upon me. I have to calculate it, I have to know when it's due, and I make that payment from my own hands. And he sent that boy in front of the religious authority to pay his responsibility. Don't teach your children just to ask for money and receive money. They'll learn that anyway. Teach them to give money, to give and fulfill their responsibilities, because nobody else will do that for them. And rather than the fact that at the age of 60 they realize that all my life I didn't fulfill my obligations, I didn't do what was required of me, teach them from an early age that whatever you possess, there is a responsibility upon it. Fulfill the responsibility as Allah has demanded. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Our discussion these past few nights has been on the connection and the relationship between Imam al-Hussain and the Imam of our time. One of the questions that's asked about the religion of Islam, and one of the misconceptions about the religion of Islam, is that Islam is a religion, na'uzubillah, of violence. Islam was spread by the sword, it was taught by the sword, and that will always be the goal of this religion. Whereas the truth of it is, Islam has never been a religion of violence. It has never been, from what our Prophet taught us to what the Imams enacted, a religion of violence. Rather, the entire purpose is the exposure to the mercy of Allah. Allah's goal when He establishes religion on this earth is not to punish people, but to give them an opportunity to be able to connect with Allah and to receive the mercy of Allah. Which is why, if you take a look and see that every surah of the Quran, with the exception of one, Surah At-Tawbah, begins with Bismillahir Rahman. Come on, are you guys awake or sleeping? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of the Beneficent, the Merciful. Allah wants that mercy to be exposed to people. And that the most significant attribute of Allah that we have to access Him through, that is known as Wajhillah, is the mercy of Allah. In Surah Ad-Dahr we read, إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شَكُورًا. That we fed you, that the Ahlul Bayt would teach, that we give away in the interest of seeking the face of Allah. We don't want from you thanks, we don't want from you a reward. This face of Allah that is mentioned, that is talked about, is the mercy of Allah, that mercy with which Allah turns to humanity. That mercy is that most significant characteristic that we can connect with Allah through. This attribute of mercy is because the justice of Allah is something that we can't handle. The justice of Allah, all of us would fall short. How? Because imagine, as Imam Zainul Abidin explains in Sayfai Sajadiyah, Oh Allah, I have not yet thanked you for the ability to thank you. The bounties that Allah has given us in this world exist in so many levels that if He was to extract from us on the basis of justice the accountment of these rewards, we would never be able to repay Him. But not being able to repay Him, Allah Himself says that be careful that my mercy is what you should look for. That my mercy is the way I will face you with, and my mercy is what you should keep the hopes in. Which is why we see that Allah mentions in Surah Al-Zumar, verse number 53, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. Allah invites us and He says, "O my servants, do not lose hope in the mercy of Allah. Certainly Allah can forgive all of your sins." This description Allah is inviting and saying the most significant attribute that you need to pay attention to is the mercy of Allah. Then how can it be that the one who invites to mercy spreads the religion through oppression, abuse, and force? It's not possible. Which is why when we look at the life of Rahmatul lil Alameen, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that he is Rahmatul lil Alameen, a mercy to all of mankind, and that's not a title we gave him, but rather Allah describes him, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And we did not send you except as a mercy to all of mankind. The religion of Allah, keeping faith in Allah, is the access to His mercy. And therefore the one who introduced the message of Islam himself is a mercy to all of mankind. Now one of the things, and you're bearing with me very patiently and I appreciate it, and we'll move to our topic as we're continuing through this, is how is He a mercy to all of mankind? We could say that He's a mercy to the Muslimin because the Muslimin, they learn from Him and they follow this path and they receive Jannah. But what about the ones who don't follow the path of Islam? How did Allah call Him Rahmatul lil Alameen? Yet there are people who don't believe in Him. They don't believe that He was anything, na'uzu billah. But look and see how Allah introduces this Prophet to the world, that at the birth of our Prophet, Allah changes the entirety of reality that exists on this earth. He changes the abilities of the soothsayers. He changes the ability of how the heavens operate on the birth of our Prophet. And He announces and He says, from this day, from the birth of this Prophet, I will not send down my adhab on this earth upon any people. If we wanted to understand how our Prophet is Rahmatul lil Alameen, a mercy to all of mankind, those who keep faith in Islam, they found a path to Allah. They found a way to connect with Allah. But those who didn't believe in Allah and they continued to sin, before it would happen, when you saw the nations of the past, that Allah would send His punishment down and wipe them off of the face of this earth. When Allah wipes a nation off from the face of this earth, whether it be Ad, whether it be Thamud, whether it be Qawm Lut, whether it be the people of Fir'aun, there's no coming back from that. There's no opportunity to change and to seek the mercy of Allah once the punishment has been sent. But Allah made our Prophet that source of mercy, that now that He's on this earth, no nation will be wiped off of this earth. Rather, instead, the door of mercy will remain open. One of the elements we talked about a few nights ago was the idea and the concept that our children are thawab jariyah, a continuous reward, that when we leave this world, that they can continue to do good for us. Imagine and say that a nation of people who were sinful and they committed indecencies against the command of Allah and refused to believe in Allah. Yet there comes a point in time that their children, their children's children, their children's children's children learn of the message of Islam and come to the path of Hidayah. If that Hidayah reaches any one of their generations, that one Muslim can intercede for his forefathers and seek forgiveness for them. One of the common questions that comes up is, Sheikh, we have a very good friend, but he's not Muslim. Can we pray for him? Yeah, you can pray for him. But there's one dua you make for them, just one. Not for wealth, not for status, not for position, simply for Hidayah. If there's anyone that we work with, that we deal with, they're going through difficulty, they're going through problems in life, they ask, will you pray for me? Always say yes. But the dua that you make for them is the dua for Hidayah. That one thing, Hidayah and guidance, will save them from the difficulties being pointless, and that there is a reward that they earn for that difficulty. as well as for their forefathers and their lineages. In this way, when we take a look at Rasulullah being rahmatul lil alameen, that the door for repentance and turning back was left open, that anyone from any generation has the potential that as long as one of their family members comes back to the path of Islam, that there is a possibility that intercession can reach them. Further to this, tangent for a second if you guys are okay. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Our sixth Imam would make a statement and he would say, be careful, O mu'mineen, who you take assistance from. Be very careful. Don't take assistance from just anybody. I said, لِمَاذَا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ وَأَيَّبْنَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ? Why shouldn't we take assistance from anyone? And the Imam explains, on the day of judgment, the day of difficulty, whoever you have offered assistance to in this world will seek the recompense for that assistance on the day of judgment. And that the mu'min's ability to give shafa'ah will mandate that that person, you offer them assistance because of what they gave you in your life. The Imam explains and he says that the mu'min himself, the one who follows the path of hidayah, has the ability to do shafa'ah. We see in narrations that every mu'min will possess the ability to do shafa'ah for at least 40 people. But there is one thing, those 40 people that each of us have the ability to intercede in. One is you choose who you intercede for. The other is the person demands the compensation on the day of judgment that you must intercede for me, and they take it from you by force. This way we see the impact of the mercy of Allah is such that rahmatul lil alameen, when we discuss our Prophet as being the mercy to mankind, it is the mercy to those who know, and even those who do not know are subject to the mercy of our Prophet. Understanding the significance of mercy in the religion of Islam, and the fundamental of the religion of Islam is mercy. That is rahmah, and getting closer to the mercy of Allah. Getting away from the justice of Allah that we can't bear. And turning to Allah through His mercy is the benefit of Islam. And this is what Allah desired when He gave us Islam. Now, understanding this, the next place that we turn our focus upon is a statement of our Holy Prophet, where he makes the statement and he says, Husainum minni wa ana min Hussain. Our Prophet makes this very powerful statement. It has a very deep meaning, and we'll only touch a piece of it. That Hussain is from me and I am from Hussain. To understand that Imam Hussain is from the Holy Prophet, we can understand this. That from the one aspect, he is the Sibt, he is the grandson of the Holy Prophet. He is the blood of the Holy Prophet. Our Prophet would describe him as his son. Our Prophet would describe him as his son, who he is the leader, Sayyid al-Shabab Ahl al-Jannah, the leader of the youth of paradise. If you go further, you look and you see that the infancy of Imam Hussain was not like the infancy of anyone else. Where it is that a normal child nurses and then from that he grows, they would describe and say that we saw Hussain ibn Ali, that after he was born, he would be nursed on the thumb of Rasulullah. And that he would suck on the thumb of Rasulullah and be nourished for days at a time. That the flesh of Abu Abdullah grew from suckling the thumb of Rasulullah. This aspect of Husainum minni, that Hussain is from me, has the symbolic element of being the grandson, that this is the continuation of the lineage of Rasulullah, and has the physical aspect that literally the flesh of Imam Hussain was grown by the barakat and the miracle of Rasulullah. So that on the day of Ashura, the one who raised his hand against Imam Hussain was raising his hand against that flesh grown by Rasulullah, to complete the judgment of the Prophet against that nation who committed indecencies and atrocities in the field of Karbala. But the statement where Rasulullah goes and he says, Ana min Hussain, that I am from Hussain, asks the question that how is it that Rasulullah comes from Imam Hussain? The philosophical aspect of trying to address this is very deep. But we simply state this point and say that one who wants to attach himself to the guidance of Rasulullah, the mercy of Rasulullah, cannot do it if he ignores the children of Rasulullah. Sometimes people will make a statement, and I've heard this argument as well, that what is the need of Ahlul Bayt? If we fast and we pray, it is sufficient to receive the mercy of Allah. Why do we need to attach ourselves to this cause of Imam Hussain? But to remember something, that those who we are certain will receive the punishment of Allah for being the enemies of Imam Hussain in Karbala were also people who prayed and fasted and recited Quran. The recitation of Quran, the recitation of prayers, without understanding the authority of Allah on this earth, can still lead a person to the path of misguidance. That we need this path, and which is why when Rasulullah makes the statement, Ana min Hussain, is to say that you cannot reach Rasulullah if you ignore his children and his lineage. Which is why when we look at the example of Imam Hussain, we will see the mercy of Rasulullah present as well too. We'll mention 3 points in the mercy that we see from Imam Hussain that was taught to us by Rasulullah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One is the aspect of the character of Rasulullah, that Imam Hussain embodied that character. The character of Rasulullah being a mercy to humanity and being something that invited people to the path of goodness is something that Allah talked about in the Quran as well too. That we see in Surah Al Imran, verse number 159. Allah says, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظًا الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. Allah describes and He says that it is due to the mercy of Allah that you, Ya Rasulullah, deal with them gently. And had you been rough with them and hard-hearted with them, they would certainly have dispersed from around you. The character of Rasulullah was something that was attractive to the people that brought them to the path of Islam. So we see the character of Imam Hussain being something that was constantly attractive to the people and brought them to the path and the direction of the mercy of Allah. Even in the most difficult moments, you will see that Imam Hussain was someone who called to the beauty and the path of Allah. They describe and they say, when Hussain ibn Ali was left alone in the battlefield, when we saw and we could not tell if Hussain was alive or if his soul had left his body, we had never seen one who is more beautiful yet is covered in his own blood. But when we would go close to him, we would hear him busy in the dhikr and the dua of Allah. So much so that so many of the enemies would turn away in shame, crying, because of the attributes of mercy that they saw in the example of Imam Hussain. So we see that Imam Hussain, from his character, was someone who brought people to the mercy of Allah. The second aspect that we saw in the similitude of Abu Abdullah and Rasulullah was his ability to create a community and create mercy in the hearts of people. One of the most unique things, if you study the biography of our Holy Prophet, that our Prophet did that no one before him has ever been documented as doing, was how our Prophet bridged the gaps in communities and made one community. Remember that the people of Medina before the coming of the Prophet, the two tribes of Yathrib, the Aus and the Khazraj, had been fighting for over 100 years before the advent of our Prophet amongst them. Yet our Prophet is the one who upon his coming not only bridged the gap between these two groups of people and quelled the fighting that had been going on where they couldn't remember where it came from, but he even took foreigners, the people of Mecca, brought them to Medina and created brotherhood and community amongst the people of Mecca and the people of Medina, where he created one community from people who otherwise were factions fighting amongst themselves for literally generations. To that end, when we look at, for example, the ashab of Imam Hussain, you will see every color, every nationality claims that from us was present one in the field of Karbala. When you look today in our own Hussainiyah, you will see people from a variety of nations that have been brought together by the message of Abu Abdullah. Thus you see the aspect of building a community of mercy was something that our Prophet began, and it was continued in the message of Imam Hussain. That wherever we go in the world today, in these nights, wherever is the mention of Abu Abdullah, There is no restriction to say that you are not from amongst us. Every person is welcome in that majlis, and every person cries the same for Imam Hussain. That aspect of building that community is a mercy, that it can bridge the gaps of socioeconomical status, racial status, cultural status. All of these elements get wiped away as they did in the time of Rasulullah in the example of Imam Hussain. The third of these aspects, with your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, is this element that our Prophet was someone who showed kindness to the believer and the disbeliever alike. You did not see Rasulullah when he went to Ta'if and he was attacked by the people of Ta'if, that he was returning bloody and injured, that he prayed against the people of Ta'if. You did not find that when the people of Mecca abused our Prophet for a period of 13 years, that when our Prophet conquers the city of Mecca, that he sought retribution from even one family or one household in the city of Mecca. They had abused him. Their children had thrown stones at Rasulullah. They had put entrails of a camel on Rasulullah. Yet our Prophet never sought retribution against them. So is the message of Imam Hussain, that he too, even with his enemies, did not allow his family to curse those people. He himself did not curse those enemies openly and condemn them all to the processes of receiving hell and punishment, though they deserved it. This aspect of being a mercy and always keeping the door of invitation open of mercy is a very important element. That one who extends mercy to others asks Allah for mercy as well. Which is why the lesson that we get in this concept of mercy, of being a mercy in our environments, in our communities, in our society, to those that we like and dislike, is one of the most important messages of Islam. When we look at the concept of wanting the mercy of Allah, who amongst us has the confidence that we can stand on the Day of Judgment and say, Allah, I am satisfied with your adalat, I don't need your mercy. Yet Allah, to give us His mercy on the Day of Judgment, has given us this life now to show mercy. If we don't show mercy now, then there is no reason for us to ask for mercy then. Shall I give you an example? Are we okay? Everybody's all right? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Our sixth Imam makes the statement, Man tazawwaja faqad ahraza nisfa deenih. One who gets married has protected half of his faith. May Allah get all of our young men married, and women too. Why? How does marriage become half of a person's faith? There are many different ways of analyzing this, that it protects from shahawat, it protects from difficulties, but one simple way of looking at it is that when I get married, I know my spouse in a way that no one else knows them. I know they're good, I know they're bad. All of their affairs become open to me. When I know all of the good and the bad of a person, in that moment, if I show them mercy when they make a mistake, then I can expect the mercy of Allah. Because Allah knows all of my affairs. Allah knows that when I say sorry, if I really mean it or if I don't. But if for my spouse, when they apologize to me and seek forgiveness from me, if I turn to them and say, no, I know in my heart you really don't mean it, and I'm harsh with them, and I refuse to accept their apology, now understand that Allah on the Day of Judgment, when I stand before Allah and I say, Ya Allah, forgive me, He will say, you had the authority over your spouse. You knew they're good and they're bad, yet you would not have mercy on them. So why do you today expect me to have mercy on you? Whenever we want and we think of this mercy of Allah, we can't attain it until we ourselves are merciful over those that we have authority over. One of the recommendations in the mustahabbat is when someone seeks forgiveness, whether they are truthful or not, do not question them. Accept their forgiveness, accept their apology, and move on and forget it. But what happens in our hearts is seldom mercy. Rather, when someone makes a mistake, we want to hold them to account for it. We want to punish them for it. We refuse to believe that they are honest in seeking their forgiveness. Or other times we make a statement that is very popular in the Western culture. I will forgive you, but I'll never forget. We say this, and that forgiveness is fake. Imagine now that that same lack of mercy that I show, Allah shows me on the day of judgment. That Allah says, you wanted to be forgiven, now you're forgiven. But I didn't forget, now you will be held account for it. And at that moment we will cry and complain, Ya Allah, I asked for your mercy. And Allah will turn and say, I wanted to see your mercy to my creation and you never gave it. Then how can you expect my mercy today? This aspect of mercy becomes a very important element that in our lives, when it comes to our families, our communities, our relationships, our relatives, have mercy. Don't think that do they deserve it or do they not deserve it. Because understand, none of us are deserving of the mercy of Allah. But we can't receive the mercy of Allah if we have never given anyone mercy. The truth of that mercy is the process of forgiving and forgetting, and giving them the equity and the opportunity of being fair and equal in our eyes, that we forget the matter when it's forgiven, and do it not with the intention that the person deserves it, but with the intention that I need that kind of forgiveness and mercy from Allah. If I want that mercy, I need to give it first. Which brings us to the connection that the relationship between our Imam in Karbala and the Imam of our time, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. I know it's hot, but the number of people in this room, there's no way that that's an appropriate salawat for the Imam of our time. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ahsantum. Always remember that when mu'mineen gather the opportunity to recite this salawat, imagine that you are competing with the malaika in the heavens. That they too are sending salawat on the Imam. And if one was to ask who loves the Imam more, those in the heavens sending salawat upon him, or the mu'mineen when they gather in this earth, it should be the mu'mineen in this earth love the Ahlul Bayt more, and their salawat resonates in the heavens before we hear them in the heavens. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When we talk about the Imam of our time, there's this misconception that our Imam will be someone who will be a lover of war, that will kill off the people. We mentioned the Imam's goal is hidayah. The Imam's goal is mercy as well. That just in the same way that our Prophet showed mercy to friend and enemy alike, that Abu Abdullah was merciful to even those who were against him. We will see mercy in the government of the Imam. These statements and these arguments that people make and say that so many thousands and millions will be killed. No, the intention of the Imam will be to show mercy to humanity. He too will build a community of mercy amongst all of the people, and equity in treatment, and guidance for humanity. That when we look forward to the government of the Imam, we look forward to a government where today that we see people with whom we have such differences that we can't imagine that we could be friends. That, oh, may Allah hasten the appearance of the Imam, that he would shorten these distances amongst us and create equity and fair treatment and mercy in our hearts for everyone that exists. This mercy of the Imam that we look forward to will be a collection in the guidance of bringing humanity to achieve goals and success that could not otherwise be imagined. Today, the knowledge that we possess is so limited that there are so many elements that we are unaware of and items that we could accomplish. And we will talk about how it is that the Imam of our time will open the treasures of this earth, so much so that wealth will become useless. That money won't mean anything. The narrations that describe that Baytul Mal in the time of our Imam will call out to the entire globe and humanity, is there anyone in need that we can give them wealth? and no one but one or two people will answer and say that we want wealth, and Baytul Mal will provide for them. And then upon receiving that wealth, those people will be embarrassed to say we really didn't need it, we were being greedy. And they will say, take it back. And the Baytul Mal of the government of Islam will reply and say, when we give, we do not take back. You asked for it, now keep it. An environment like that, where wealth is useless, comes into existence when there is mercy and understanding amongst the society and people. There is no greed amongst society. One of the ways that we prepare for the coming of the Imam is that mercy and community today. There's a short book by the name of Kitab al-Mu'min. Kitab al-Mu'min is a small book of hadith that is compiled in the life of our 10th and 11th Imam. This small book talks about the attributes of a believer, of how a believer behaves, what befalls a believer, and how a believer interacts. In one of the authentic narrations of this book, a man comes to our 6th Imam and he says, Yabna Rasulullah, in our time, in our town, there are many Shia and followers of the Ahlul Bayt. The Imam turns to him and he asks him, is it possible for the poor amongst you to reach into the pocket of the wealthy amongst you and take their needs? And the man replies, he says, Yabna Rasulullah, no, it's not possible in our town for someone to reach in the pocket of his brother and take his needs. Don't do that now. That's not what I'm inviting you to do. The instruction, the Imam says, then yet Iman has not entered you. You are not our Shia yet. The characteristics of mercy of our Shia amongst each other is that they're constantly paying attention to each other and aiding each other where the dignity is protected and they can help one another. Many times when we talk about offering aid to another person, our reaction is, if they ask me, I'll give them. If they need help, they can ask me. I'm here to help. Amir al-Mu'mineen explains this point very clearly. He says, charity is when you give before they ask. Once they've asked you, it's no longer charity. It's protecting your dignity. See, once someone has asked you and openly shown the society that you've been asked for assistance, you're not giving him because he deserves it. You're giving him so that people see you as being someone who is generous, that your dignity is preserved, that someone asked you and you gave them, not because it was the right thing to do. When we look at having mercy amongst our communities, it is the element that we pay attention to one another and we give one another and take care of each other's needs without making them feel any loss in dignity or having to expose their need to another. This is that aspect of mercy in the community that we want to build. That is in the time of the Imam that these needs of the people will be met. Mercy is that one characteristic, that's one all-important characteristic, that even when you don't realize it, you rely more upon mercy than you do anything else. When we think of the person that we are here to discuss tonight, Abul Fadl al-Abbas, and we think about that warrior and that champion, you don't ask him because of he's a warrior, you ask him because he's merciful. He assists the one in need, which is why we keep hopes in Abul Fadl al-Abbas and we call him Babul Hawa'ij, the gateway of the answering of your needs. That even the awliya of Allah, those who are close to Allah, we may decide to call them by their names of bravery, but when we ask Allah by their wasila, we are appealing to the mercy that that person represents. If you want to be close to Allah, there is no way to be closer to Allah than to be merciful to people in society. It is an interesting tradition that we see that the 7th of Muharram is the day or the night in which we discuss this Abul Fadl al-Abbas. Did you ever wonder that maybe we discuss him in the night of the 7th because the 7th is when the water was cut off to the camp of Imam Hussain? That one who was known as the quencher of the thirst of Ahlul Bayt, that his masa'ib are mentioned in the day that water was removed from Ali Muhammad. This Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas is not an easy matter to understand. This Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas is the consequence of the attention of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Look back and you see that when Amir al-Mu'mineen wanted to have this son, he goes to his brother Aqil and he says to him, "Oh Aqil, show me a family that is known for bravery, that I can marry from and have a brave son." Aqil says, "Oh brother, what do you need from this?" He says, "I want to prepare for that day of difficulty, that my representative should be present in that moment of difficulty. And I have one present from me." Aqil introduces him to the lady known as Fatima bint al-Hizam al-Kilabiyya. And this Bibi Fatima has 4 sons: Abbas, Ja'far, Abdullah and Uthman. The first of them is this Abbas, who when he is born, they describe and say that Amir al-Mu'mineen held him in his hands, and then after holding him, he began to examine the hands of his son and to kiss the arms of this child. al-Baneen turns and says, "Oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, is something wrong with this child?" He replies, "No, but these arms will be cut on a day." Maybe Amir al-Mu'mineen was remembering when Imam Hussain was born, that Rasulullah would hold the infant Hussain ibn Ali and kiss the neck of Imam Hussain in his cradle. This Abu Abdullah was born to be the representative of Amir al-Mu'mineen, to be the support and the strength of Imam Hussain in the field of Karbala. We wish that each one of our children would be the strength of the Imam of our time and the assistant of the Imam of our time. But to remember something, bravery is not the signature of Abu al-Fadl. It's the easiest way to recognize Hazrat Abbas, but his greatest characteristic is submitting to and following and knowing the authority of Allah on this earth. Which is why, when you see that Abu al-Fadl is born to be the representative, to be the supporter, to be the defender of the cause of Imam Hussain in Karbala, yet Abbas is that one who was not allowed to fight in Karbala, because the Imam did not permit him. That is his greatest attribute. If you could understand how brave is this Abbas, if you could understand how powerful this Abbas was, you would recognize how great of a sacrifice he made for the cause of Imam Hussain. When people want to describe the bravery of Hazrat Abbas, they look on the day of Ashura and they look at the actions of Hazrat Abbas. Some come and they say that in the beginning, when the armies faced off, this commander of the army of Imam Hussain saw 10 of his companions get surrounded by the army of Umar al-Sa'd. And where 10 men could not escape, one Abu al-Fadl went and freed all 10 of these men. Meaning Abu al-Fadl was stronger than 10 men. What 10 men could not do, this one Abbas could do. Others look and say, no, look on the day of Ashura, and what you will see is that when they wanted to go for water, there were 4,000 archers who stood in front of the water, and this one Abu al-Fadl was sufficient to go, and 4,000 men ran at the approach of the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib. That Abu al-Fadl was stronger than 4,000 men. I would say you do a disservice to Hazrat Abbas. You have not understood who is Abbas. Imam Hussain, when he looks at his companions, he says, "You, O Abbas, will be the commander of my army. I will place you at the head of my army, and I will station you in front of the soldiers, in front of the tents." You notice on the day of Ashura, we describe it and we say that Imam Hussain was madloom, but whenever someone would go and fall in the battlefield, Abu Abdullah would run to the battlefield and collect their body with his own hands. But to remember something, Imam Hussain didn't just possess an army, he possessed women and children with him. The reason Imam Hussain could leave the women and children and go to the battlefield is because this one Abbas stood in front of the tents. An army of 30,000 was afraid to approach the women of Imam Hussain. That this one Abbas was enough. that 30,000 men would dare not approach the women of Imam Hussain. Which is why when Abul Fadl fell, Imam Hussain made the most heart-wrenching cry. That is there no one to help me? This was the value that Abul Fadl added, that Imam Hussain openly went into the battlefield, fought against the enemy, supported his followers, brought their bodies back, because no one would dare to touch the women as long as Abul Fadl stood in front of these tents. And some of these poets and authors narrate that when Abul Fadl would become angry at this, that he was the commander and in front of the tents, he would call out and say, "Oh enemy, you kill my brother's followers, you kill my Imam's Shia, you kill my Imam's children. Have you no ghira? Have you no shame? Come to me and fight me. Why do you run from me in fear when Abbas is in front of you?" But they would not dare. And he would ask for permission, but permission would not be granted, because the hurriyat of Abu Abdullah in the field of Karbala was guaranteed. That as long as Abbas is behind him, Imam Hussain may enter into the battlefield at any time he chooses. Until eventually a point comes when Abul Fadl again turned to Imam Hussain and he said, "Mawla, give me permission." And Imam Hussain replies and he says, "Oh Abbas, you are the commander of my army. I can't let you go, because who will command the troops after this?" They describe and say that Abul Fadl looked to the right, looked to the left and said, "Oh brother, what army? Now there is either you or there is me. There is no one else left but us in the battlefield." They describe and say that 3 days of thirst in the field of Karbala had made the children cry out from the tent, where eventually Abul Fadl says, "Brother, if you don't allow me to fight, at least allow me as the one who is known from my childhood as the water bearer of Ali Muhammad, to go collect water for these children." If you knew the excessiveness of that thirst that you will hear about in these nights, you would understand how difficult it must have been for Abul Fadl to listen to children crying for thirst. And yet the son of Ali is still alive. Eventually they describe and they say that Abu Abdullah gives permission to Hazrat Abbas. In some of the maqatil it is noted that the two brothers decided together that they would go to collect this water. One would push away the army, the other would collect the water. That they went and they began their attack. The army, seeing these two brothers, separated Abu Abdullah from Abul Fadl. Abul Fadl became alone. He approached the direction of the water. The one hand of Abul Fadl that held the alam, the other was enough that 4,000 men ran in fear. They pushed Imam Hussain back. Abul Fadl reaches the water. They say that Abul Fadl enters the water. They say he collects this water in his hand. Some make a mistake to say he wanted to drink. I tell you that Abul Fadl, his character and akhlaq was such that I imagine he would say, "Oh enemies of Allah, you thought you were keeping me away from this water. I can take this water as the son of Ali whenever I desire. If Abbas does not drink, it is because his master does not drink. If Abbas is thirsty, it is because Hussain is thirsty." They describe and say that Abul Fadl collected the water in the mashq. He began to turn back in the direction of the tents. They said that these soldiers of Hussain have been thirsty for 3 days and we have not been able to stop them. If this Abbas returns with water now and these soldiers of Hussain ibn Ali or Hussain receives water, we will never be able to stop him. So they began to attack with treachery. They came to Abul Fadl's pass and they hid in ways. And then eventually it came that with treachery from behind a tree, one mal'un came, struck the right hand of Abbas. Imagine that he would stop Abbas. But Abul Fadl replied, "You cut off my right hand, but I am the defender of Islam still." They said he proceeded, we did not stop him. They came from another direction with treachery. They cut his left hand. He continued on his path until Omar Asad said, "Shower arrows upon him. Stop him any which way that you can." They describe and say that so many arrows were shot at Abu al-Fadil. When Mukhtar captures Harmala Mal'oon, he says, Harmala, what were your sins of the day of Ashura? He says, I shot on that day 4 arrows. The first of those arrows, I shot at the water skin that Abbas carried in his teeth. In that moment, they describe and say in the court of Mukhtar that Harmala himself said, when I saw that water drain from the musk that was in the hands, in the teeth of Abbas, I saw as if his life drained from his body. They attacked him in such a way that they continued to shoot arrows until eventually they shot an arrow in his eye. They describe and say when someone is shot in the eye, they remove an arrow with their hands. al-Baneen, when she would cry over her children and cry over Imam Hussain, one of the things that she would say is that I was told my Abbas was killed when they struck a mace on his head. But oh my Abbas, you were so tall, who could reach your head to strike you with a mace? al-Baneen, if you would have seen this moment in the field of Karbala, Abbas wants to return to Hussain. He has no hands. An arrow has struck his eye. The blood prevents him from seeing. Abu al-Fadil lowers his head, attempts to pull the arrow with his knees. An enemy comes from behind, strikes the head of Abbas, and Abbas then falls from his horse. In this moment they describe and say that he bids his farewell to Imam Hussain. Imam Hussain, who went to every soldier who fell in the field of Karbala, when seeing Abu al-Fadil fall in the field, there is one statement Imam Hussain makes, Al-an ankasara dhahri. Now my back has been broken. They describe and say that Imam Hussain comes to Abu al-Fadil. Abu al-Fadil is surrounded by the enemies laying in the field of Karbala. They say that as we saw Hussain ibn Ali approach the body of Abbas on the ground, we could hear this Abbas calling out, "O enemies of Allah, I know that you intend to kill me. I know that you wish to desecrate me, but give me a chance to bid farewell to my master. Then you may do with me what you wish." In this much, Imam Hussain reaches the side of Abu al-Fadil. He says, "Brother, I have come to you." He says, "What can I do for you?" Abu al-Fadil says, "Brother, clear the blood from my eye so that I can see you one last time." Abu al-Fadil looks at his brother. Imam Hussain wants to take the head of Abu al-Fadil in his lap, but Abu al-Fadil refuses and removes his head many times. Until eventually Imam Hussain says, "Brother, you are about to die, let me hold your head." Abu al-Fadil replies, he says, "No, I saw when Baba Amir al-Mu'mineen, when our father died, his head was in the lap of Imam Hassan. When Imam Hassan was poisoned, brother, I saw his head was in your lap. Brother, Mawla, I worry, if you give me this comfort, whose lap will your head be in your final moments?" Oh Abbas, you did not live long enough to see that it was the head of Hussain and it was the knee of Shimr on his chest in that moment. Abu al-Fadil makes his wasiyah. He says, "Brother, do not take me back to the tent." The question could be asked, why leave such a wasiyah? Don't take me back to the tent. Every shaheed was brought back to the tent. But Abu al-Fadil said, "Don't bring me back." There are two opinions about this. One that says, how will that brother who has carried the body of Akbar now carry the body of Abbas? The other says that Abbas was the guarantor of the hijab and the rida of Zainab. All of the women knew that as long as this Abbas is alive, that we are in a position of safety and sanctity. They knew this from the shahadat of Imam Ali, that when Amir al-Mu'mineen left this world, he gave the protection of the women in the hands of Abbas. After that moment, they say that Sayyidah Zainab says, "Baba, before you leave, I have heard a great day of great difficulty will befall us. Is it true?" Amir al-Mu'mineen says, "Zainab, a day will come that will be so difficult that your hijab will be violated, your brothers will be killed, people will dare against you as they have never dared against the family of Rasulullah. Zainab turned to her father and she said, Baba, how can that happen when I have a brother like Abbas? Maybe it was that moment that Abu al-Fadl was remembering when he said, don't take me back to the tent. So Imam Hussain left Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas in the field of Karbala. He came back in front of the tent and he made a call. He comes out and he stands and he says, Ala hal min nasirin yansuruna? Is there anyone to help us? Hearing this, Sayyidah Zainab came to the door of the tent. She called, brother, I have never heard you call like this as long as Abbas was alive. Where is my Abbas? Why is he not by your side? The Baqatil write, Abu Abdullah did not have words that how does he tell Sayyidah Zainab? So he goes to the tent of Hazrat Abbas. He knocks down the pole and the tent falls. As soon as this happens, they describe, Zainab latama wajha. Sayyidah Zainab strikes her face, faces in direction of Najaf and says, Baba, today is that day you warned me of. Now that there is no Abbas, I worry for this hijab. Ala la'natullahi ala al-qawm al-zalimin.